My husband Thomas and I were dumbfounded. Our eldest son and his wife hadn't even bothered to let us know about the birth of their child. Yet our desire to see our grandchild's face overpowered everything else. Armed with practical gifts like clothes and diapers, we visited their upscale condominium. A long silence ensued when they realized it was us. But eventually, the entrance door opened. The interior resembled a luxury hotel with its lavish decorations. The elevator swiftly took us to the top floor. As soon as we rang the doorbell, the front door opened. There stood Donna, hands on her hips, blocking the way. "Drop off the gifts and leave quickly." My husband was on the verge of exploding with anger. "Just wait a minute." Donna began checking the clothes we brought, then threw them all away. "What era are these children's clothes from? I can't possibly put my child in these, it's embarrassing. They are truly a nuisance. We don't need the diapers either. They're different from the ones we use." "That's it, you rascal!" My husband had reached his breaking point. "This is meddling at its worst. I didn't contact you because I don't want to associate with people who lack common sense to bring such things." "Fine, we'll never come again." "Oh, I'm glad. It'll be nice to finally cut ties." "Understood. We'll never meet again. We're cutting off our relationship." With the gift still in hand, we left, feeling heavy-hearted. However, some time later, our son's poorly dressed wife came to our house. "I'm Maria, a 60-year-old housewife. I work part-time in cleaning 3 days a week. I live with my husband, 3 years older, and we have 2 children who have left home and live alone. Our eldest son Billy graduated from a top university and works for a leading trading company. Our younger son John went to a vocational school for IT and works in the field." One day, I received a call from John. "I found a woman I want to marry. I'd like her to meet Dad and Mom." Tears fell from my eyes as I listened to John's story. My memories went back to when John was in high school. He was troubled back then. Violence, both in and out of school, was a daily occurrence. Today, I was called to the police station again. Sitting on an old bench in the dim hallway, I waited for John to come out. Where did I go wrong with my children's education? Our eldest, Billy, was obedient and easy to raise, but our younger son had always been active and challenging since he was little. He's just a lively boy. Boys need to be that way. But he's violent towards other kids. John had been hitting other children since preschool. He was known as a problem child even then. How many times had I visited the parents of those children to apologize? I covered my face with both hands, crying uncontrollably. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I looked up, startled. He was a bit intimidating, but smiled as if to reassure me. I braced myself, thinking I would be reprimanded for failing to educate my son. "Don't be so defensive. I'm not here to blame you or your son." I looked at the officer with my tear-stained face. "I handle juvenile delinquency cases. I'd like to talk to you in this room." Nervously, I followed him. The room he led me to was stark. There were just a few folding tables, pipe chairs, and a steel shelf with files. "It must be hard for you. I've seen you here often." "I'm sorry for always causing trouble." I apologized, looking down. "I hear your other son is very smart." "I've never compared him to my other son." "I believe you haven't." I didn't understand what the officer was getting at. "It's a common pattern. It's not verbal, but the child feels an unspoken pressure." So, what should I do? My emotions were a mix of desperation and frustration. It would be good if John could find something he's passionate about. Directing his negative energy elsewhere has worked for other boys I've seen. I couldn't think of anything that might captivate John. When he finally appeared, I apologized repeatedly and left the police station. Was I subconsciously comparing him to his older brother? No answer came to my self-questioning. I was getting depressed over John. So, to distract myself, I started taking photos of park flowers and wildflowers and posting them on social media. But as always, I struggled with the unfamiliar computer. I had managed to operate the computer just fine before. But now, I had forgotten how. I was staring at the computer screen, frozen. Mom, what are you doing? Staring at the screen won't get you anywhere. John was under in school suspension and stuck at home all day, probably bored out of his mind, which is why he started bothering me. John, do you understand this? I just can't figure it out. I stretched and rubbed my shoulders. Move over. How can you not get this? John pushed me out of the chair and sat down in front of the computer. He typed at a blinding speed, quickly finishing what I couldn't do. Is there anything else you need help with? I had him upload the pictures of flowers I had taken to social media. Amazing! John, you're a genius! What are you talking about? Anyone can do this. It felt like the first time in a while that John and I had a pleasant conversation. It was a turning point for him. John was captivated by computers. He wanted his own computer, but my husband was reluctant. However, I convinced my husband, and we bought a computer together. I'll never forget the joy on John's face, like a child. After that, John changed. He started going to school diligently. He joined the computer club and quickly improved. After graduating high school, John enrolled in a vocational school for IT and landed a job at an IT company. The police officer was right. It was a miracle that John found computers. And now, that same John was bringing home a partner. I was over the moon. There couldn't be anything more joyful. My husband and I eagerly awaited their visit. We invited them to join us for lunch and told them to come around noon. I went all out and cooked several dishes. My husband said, "You've made too much. They won't be able to eat all of that." But he was also looking forward to it. When the doorbell rang, my husband and I hurried to the door. The woman standing with John was calm and soothing. "Nice to meet you. I'm Laura." "No need for formalities. Come in, please." The meal with John and Laura was delightful. "Delicious! Teach me how to make this next time." "Mom's cooking is always great." "I want to remember this taste." I'm flattered, even if it's just flattery. Talking with her was calming, and I felt healed. My husband was smiling the whole time. "I'll bring some coffee after the meal." "I can help." "No, it's fine. Just sit." When I returned with the coffee, Laura had fallen asleep in her seat. "Mom, sorry. She couldn't sleep last night because of the nerves and got sleepy after eating." "Don't worry about it. It's nice she's so comfortable. Cover her with a blanket so she doesn't catch a cold." My husband and I exchanged smiles. We really liked the woman who would become John's wife. After about 30 minutes, Laura woke up, still groggy. "Good morning." "What are you, still half asleep?" My husband and I laughed heartily at the exchange between a groggy Laura and John. Laura, now fully awake, blushed and looked down. "She's a fun girl. I like her. Please take care of John." "Laura brightens up the house. I'm counting on you, too." Laura nodded with tears in her eyes. I had cried at the police station once, but it's overwhelming how different the meaning of tears can be. We wanted to help with the wedding, so we offered them $15,000, but John stubbornly refused. After the wedding, life went back to normal. Then one day, my eldest son Billy announced he was bringing home a partner. Billy, who always held a higher position than John, seemed to feel a bit defeated that he was behind on marriage. "John got married, but that doesn't mean you need to rush into it. Take your time and think it over." Billy was smart, but his intelligence didn't always lead him in the right direction. Unlike John, whose misbehavior was visible, Billy's was more subtle and insidious. He could only validate himself by looking down on others. I knew well enough about Billy's negative traits. I wanted to correct them, but I was just another target of his condensation. I think to Billy, everyone but himself was beneath him. A bit of intelligence only exasperated that. "Don't say that. I'm bringing her home to meet you and Dad." I wasn't too keen on the idea. It's hard to think poorly of your own son, but what kind of woman would fall for him? Certainly someone capable of handling Billy. I imagined she would be a cunning woman. The day came when Billy brought his fiancée. I prepared the meal, just like I did for John. Now, Billy and his fiancée were sitting in front of me. She was certainly beautiful, but that was all. She lacked any manners. Her attitude suggested she was here only because she was told to. She didn't introduce herself until we asked, and only then did she respond. I don't know if it's to Dona's taste, but please try the food. Home cooked? Gross. It's common sense to at least prepare a fancy steak or something. Does this house have any sense of decency? Yeah, Mom's cooking is insulting. I could see anger filling my husband's face. I quickly placed my hand on his knee and shook my head. He sighed deeply, regaining his composure. That was rude of us. We'll keep that in mind for next time. No, that's okay. We won't be coming back here. We only came today to get our wedding funds of $30,000. My husband and I exchanged looks. We need the money. You gave John money, right? We want our wedding funds too. It's not a matter of asking. It's obvious you should give it to us. We shouldn't have to ask. Don't get it wrong, Billy. Yeah, it's only natural to receive it. The woman's face, smiling at Billy, was devilish. But she was not just a little devil. She was the devil itself. Billy seemed completely in her grasp. I couldn't see it any other way. Understood. We'll pay the $30,000. You've got what you came for. Please leave now. Both my husband and I were dizzy with anger. I hoped they would leave quickly, before I lost my temper and hit her. Donna stood up as if realizing there was no more need to stay, and headed for the entrance. Billy followed her out. I threw all the food I had prepared into the trash. We had prepared $15,000 each for them, but John didn't accept it. We decided to combine that with the other $15,000 to give $30,000 to Billy. I'm sorry about last time. Donna doesn't know how to speak properly. She didn't mean any harm. Then, until she learns to speak, she doesn't need to come back. Since their wedding, we haven't seen Billy and his wife for a while. It's certain to be unpleasant if we do meet. We haven't reached out either. One day, John called. Did you hear from Billy? He had a baby boy. Nothing at all. A baby was born? Yeah, a boy. My husband and I were at our wits' end. Even after having a child, they didn't contact us. But still, our desire to see our grandchild was too strong. Baby clothes, bibs, diapers. We picked out what seemed necessary and visited Billy's place. Their apartment was on the top floor of a luxury condominium. When we rang the doorbell, we heard Donna's voice. After a long silence, realizing it was us, the entrance door opened. The interior was decorated like a luxury hotel. The elevator quickly took us to the top floor. As soon as we rang the front doorbell, the door opened, and there stood Donna, hands on her hips, blocking the way. We heard from John about the baby and wanted to see our grandchild. Can we come in? Drop off the gifts and leave quickly. My husband was on the verge of exploding with anger. Just wait a minute. Donna began checking the clothes we brought and threw them all in the hallway. What era are these children's clothes from? I can't put my child in these. They're embarrassing. They're really a nuisance. I was worried about my husband's blood pressure rising. We also don't need these diapers. They're different from what we use. That's it, you rascal. My husband had reached his breaking point. This is overstepping boundaries. I didn't contact you because I don't want to associate with people who lack common sense to bring such things. Understood. We won't come again. Oh, how wonderful. Now we can cleanly sever ties. Understood. We won't meet again. We're cutting off our relationship. We left with the gifts we brought, feeling heavy-hearted. But after a while, our dark days were brightened by John and his wife. We've decided to build a house. Would you like to live with us? Thomas and Maria, would you like to live with us too if it's not a bother? I liked Laura and was confident we could get along well. I happily accepted their offer of living together. Looking at my husband, I could tell he was quite excited about it. Just remember, if you regret moving in later, don't blame me. I can be quite difficult. Don't scare Laura like that. It's okay, Laura. I'll keep him in check. It had been a while since laughter filled our house. John had been diligently saving money since he started working. Had he been living more stably than I had thought? Look at this! How much more does Billy need to show off? It was a photo of the two uploaded on social media. Dressed up, they stood against the backdrop of a luxury condominium's view, wearing expensive brand clothing. Spending like this? No amount of money is ever enough. Even renting that condo must cost a fortune. Our worries became a reality when Donna, whom we had cut ties with, showed up at our house. It was just as we started living with John and his wife, an unwelcome visitor. She was dressed in high-end brands, but her clothes looked neglected and shabby. You said you wanted to cut ties, didn't you? I did, but I came to make you take responsibility for birthing such a useless son. According to Donna, she had advised Billy to use tactics to increase his earnings. Billy worked at a top company and should have a decent income. It seemed more like a case of overspending. I told him to count tentative contracts as actual ones, to quickly climb the ranks. But tentative contracts don't count as achievements, do they? Just turn them into actual contracts after reporting them? I listened to Donna, dumbfounded. And that idiot couldn't convert any into actual contracts. But that's something that would be found out quickly. Exactly. That's why he got fired. What does Billy getting fired have to do with me? I'm saying take responsibility for birthing such an incompetent son. We have nowhere to live, so we'll stay here with you. I grabbed Donna by the collar and dragged her out of the house. I had had many confrontations when John was in high school, so dealing with her was easy. What are you doing? Stop it! Stop? You should stop. Don't come back here. Donna yelled outside the door for a while, but eventually left. Silence returned. I haven't seen Donna or Billy since that day. Billy apparently went to John several times to borrow money, but John never lent him any. According to John, they now live in an old apartment. John showed me a recent social media post of Billy and Donna. They were posing as if they were celebrities. Despite wearing high-end brands, their clothes were yellowed at the collar, seemingly not cleaned. It's sad they exposed such a pitiful state to the world. Our two-family living situation is going well. Although we say two-family, it's just a house with more rooms, not separate entrances. There's John and Laura's room, a room for their future children, and our room. There's only one kitchen. Laura and I cook together. After meals, we all relax in the living room. My friends envy me when I tell them about it. We're looking forward to our grandchild's growth. Photos of Billy, Donna, and their son are still being posted on social media. Donna could have left Billy and their child to find a wealthy man using her beauty, but she continues to live with Billy, who doesn't have his old income. This suggests that their bond isn't solely based on money, nor does it seem like their child is the only thing keeping them together. I wonder if there will ever be a time we reconcile with Billy and his wife. I don't expect it, but observing Billy and Donna, I can't help but find marriage a fascinating thing.